Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Oliver Suter. I'm the Membership Sales Representative at CCIQ and will be your facilitator for today. Joining me is Founder and Executive Director of Salesmasters International, Peter McEwen. Salesmasters have kindly partnered with us to present a three-part webinar series to provide businesses with information and advice on how to communicate with your customers and what will be the new normal post-COVID-19. Today's webinar is the second in this series on having meaningful sales conversations with your customers. Peter will show in practical takeaway terms how to engage with customers that will place you and your business front of mind. But before we start, if you want to ask a question, you can do so at any time during the webinar using the chat box that appears in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. I will now hand over to Peter to take you through today's presentation.
Thanks very much, Oliver, and welcome everyone for, as was just mentioned, part two of a three-part series. First off, I'd like to acknowledge those people who attended the first program and went to the Salesmasters CCIQ website and gave me some feedback about some of the other things that I'd like to see included into the series. I've done my best to try and, include as much as I possibly can, but just for the CCIQ people on this particular webinar, I've got an offer that I'm going to put to you at the end of it that should be able to answer most of the questions for most of the people. So as I did last time, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn my webcam off and I'm going to begin the presentation. Now that's off and away we go. Okay, so we're going to cover three key areas in today's 30-minute or so webinar. We're going to talk about connecting with customers and having digital conversations with them. We're going to talk about face-to-face conversations, and we're going to wrap it up with me giving you some what I call NIN or Need It Now tips in terms of how to maintain existing relationships with our customers. You know, when we talk about digital conversations, it's funny because coming up on your screen there, that's actually Senaya Square, I think they pronounce it, in Leningrad. And that photograph was taken late in the late 90s. And this particular photograph was a place where these citizens used to go and put their classified ads up there about stuff that they were buying or selling or exchanging. And it got so cluttered from time to time that the council would come and burn these advertisements off, and then within a day or two they were covered again. So people always wanted to buy and sell stuff, and they wanted to communicate in some form. But obviously over the last 20 years, the way we communicate with our customers has fundamentally changed. There's no secret to any of us here. You know, if you just go back to the 90s, as I mentioned a moment ago, you know, the telephone ruled the world in terms of sales. The pager was what was considered to be cutting edge. What else? Emails were just emerging, and fax was just departing. You know, but all that said, even today, and as we're in 2020, businesses today are still running behind in a number of consumer practices. Companies are currently using this is my view of the world, three main channels to communicate with their customers. The first is email, the second is social media, and the third is telephone. And they're all really, really important. And these forms of communications, guys, have really been the norm for most of us for a number of past years. And even though those three particular platforms are, definitely a best practice, what's changed today, the point I'm trying to make is what's changed today is that people are really looking for what's called real-time messaging. And what I mean by real-time messaging is that according to a recent report, we now live in a day that only 43% of people will answer a call from an unknown number. So I'm just going to run that past you again. 43, that's almost 6 people in 10 will not pick up a telephone today and answer it from an unknown number. Most of you on this webinar would be familiar with MailChimp. Well, they recently published some research document. It was called their Email Benchmark Research. And what they found out, or what they identified, was 22% of customers today do not open email, 22%. And if you just look particularly in this COVID-19 scenario and coming out of it, there is that many people engaged in writing that many emails to those many people. We're just smothered with it, absolutely drowned with it. Look, I've just told you a quick story. I was with a client, or contacted a client last Monday who had booked to do a strategy day with me. I think it was next Tuesday afternoon. And I sent him a plan that I wanted him to complete before I met with him. And I rang him and I said, Andrew, I said, did you receive that email from me? And he said, no, Peter. And I said, oh, well, I sent it, 5 or 6 days ago before the call. And he said, he's just opened up his email. He said, I have 91 emails here that I just can't get to. I'm just getting swamped. So real-time messaging really is about how people want to communicate when they want information, they want it now. It's really, if you just think about LinkedIn, you think about Facebook, you think about, even the chat function on this very webinar right now, the pop-up boxes that you may have seen on the last webinar site, website that you visited, all of these things are NIN. People need it now. So the point I'm trying to make here is that when you are communicating with your customers, particularly if you're in the digital space, which I guess most of us are in one form or another, real-time communication is absolutely critical to both consumers and business customers. Because in the wake of smartphones and new technology, it's this immediacy that people are really wanting. So my message is, I want you to start thinking about how can you and what can you do to engage with your customers, to have meaningful conversations in real time, not just old methodologies. I want to talk to you broadly now about what we call face-to-face conversations. And when it comes to having what I would often call as a belly-to-belly conversation in a sales environment, there are certain behaviors that to engage with customers effectively and emotionally in the sales process, it's a thing that's called building desire. And it's really, how do you create a fondness for your products and services? Now, building desire, just in a real broad sense, building desire relates to the way that you build a customer's desire to purchase from you through things like persuasive language and by engaging with them. Now, it's about engaging with clients in an emotional sale. And for those of you who were on the webinar from part 1, I spoke at length about that below the line communication, how we create that trust, that credibility, that sense of connection, that empathy, how people feel listened to. Well, when it comes to building desire, there are a couple of key things, or what we call behavioral clusters, that you can consider to be aware of and potentially even develop. Being persuasive in sales matters. Now, persuasiveness to me is really, I guess the degree to which you're able to engage someone emotionally in order to build fondness or product. It is not about manipulation. It is not about aggression. It is not about any sort of unethical, any sort of push. But being persuasive in your language is profoundly important. Your capacity to persuade someone will enable you to build desire for your product or service. Being outgoing is a behavior that's fundamental to building desire. I'd like you to think about the degree to which you are able to interact fluently with others without being dominant. It's not about dominance, but it's about being social. It's about being outgoing and confident, which leads me to being socially confident. Socially confident to me is really, the degree to which you're able to actually take let's say a formal social event or a function in your stride. It may have been a networking event that you turned up there, you didn't feel completely at ease, but you managed it effectively. You may have been at a trade show, you're feeling uncomfortable about that, but your capacity to demonstrate a degree of to be socially confident has a profound effect on having a meaningful conversation with a customer or a prospect. And the last one is what we call behavioral, which is the degree to which you are able to analyze some aspects of someone's behavior. And what I mean by that, I'd like you to consider when next time you're eyeballing someone in a face-to-face conversation, get curious. I'd like you to start looking, and I'm going to give you a few tips on this shortly, but start looking and observing other people's behaviors. Because what you will see is you will find opportunities there to match and mirror those behaviors, which again causes connection. Moving on to the next slide, I just wanted to put up here a couple of things from an awareness perspective around self-confidence. Self-confidence matters in having a meaningful conversation with people. So how do you develop that? Well, there's lots of things you can do to talk about it. But before you do, I've got a note here. I think I've got a slide here. I'm sure I do. Yeah, here's a couple of tips, guys. Being self-confident, typically someone who has a high degree of self-confidence, they tend to do what they believe to be right, even if other people kind of mock or criticize them for it. So they kind of have a track in life or a track in business, and they say, you know, this is right for me. It may not be right for everyone else, but it's right for me. And someone with lower self-confidence, we've identified that these people tend to be governed by what other people think or feel. Another example would be someone who has self-confidence would be someone who's willing to take a couple of risks and go the extra mile to achieve better things for customers. Really important. As opposed to someone who tends to stay in their comfort zone, fearing failure and you know, therefore avoiding risk. You know, failure from sales, let's give you a bit of an insight. It's common. I mean, it's how you deal with it. This rejection and this fear of failure is really, really common. One of my mentors many years ago said to me, Peter, you need to be successful in sales, you really need to understand fear. And he put it in an acronym, FEAR. And he said to me, he said, Peter, when you really break it down, you will find that fear in sales is a false expectation appearing real. FEAR, a false expectation appearing real. And he went on to say to me, he said, what's really interesting about fear in sales is that fear, when confronted with action, tends to be a coward. And that stuck with me. And it really gave me an opportunity to look at fear not as a mistake or something I did wrong or a personal rejection to me, but an opportunity to actually admit things and learn from them. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty aware of myself. I mean, I'm a student of all of this. You know, I've been doing this best part of 25 years, and I'm still trying to work it out. And fortunately, in the sales environment, I've got a couple of things right. We've been able to help sales masters and help other clients, but the truth of the matter is we're all students of sales, and anyone that tells you different to that, I think really is a bit delusional. So making mistakes in sales and in life for that matter, but talking sales here and learning from them is profoundly important. Someone with lower self-confidence, you know, they tend to be the people who they work pretty hard to cover up those mistakes and hoping that they can fix the problem often before anyone notices. I'm just putting this up here to make you think, because all of these things you can develop if you're so motivated to do so. Waiting for others to congratulate you on accomplishments, as opposed to, you know, some people are forever just extolling their own virtues as often as possible to as many people as possible. No need for it. You know, just you know, be comfortable within your own skin. Again, all of these things that we're talking about go a long way when you're having a conversation with someone that is meaningful, that will help reduce their risk. And look, every now and again, you, me, others, we get a compliment, and it's just pretty cool just to accept it graciously. It's like, you know, thanks, I worked really hard on that proposal. As a matter of fact, I spent a lot of time on it, and I appreciate you recognizing that. And people with low self-confidence, what they tend to do is they tend to dismiss confidence often, you know, offhandedly. Ah, like it was nothing, you know, nothing really. Anyone could have done that. We need to knock that the right side of the graph there, knock that out of our persona and start developing some of those things on the left side. So self-confidence, all around building desire, profoundly affects having meaningful conversations with people. I just wanted to have a bit of a nag with you now about communicating through better questioning. And I'm just going to put something up here, which is a question, you know, what is the ratio between asking and telling in your daily conversations with customers? Now, I just want to tell you a quick story, and you could maybe do this with a colleague at the end of this webinar, or at some point, maybe do it with a partner or family member, husband, wife, spouse, whatever, when you get home. But what we do as part of an awareness, part of developing an awareness in some of our sales training programs is we get a group, let's say there's 20 people in the room, and we get them to break up into pairs. Any pairs, doesn't matter who they are. And so they buddy up, and I say, give yourselves a little bit of space. So they're all, you know, 10 groups of 2. And I say to them, I want you to have a conversation now. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a game, and this is a really, really simple game, and it's a game of communication. And what we're going to do is you and your buddy are going to start having a conversation in a moment about absolutely any topic in the world that you and he or she would like to talk about. That's up to you two. There are only 2 conditions with this game. The first condition is, number 1, this conversation that you have with your buddy needs to be continuous, as most conversations are. And the only other condition of this game, which will define whether you win or lose, is you cannot use the word I. Start. And it blows me away every single time. Within 5 to 10 seconds, people start laughing. They just can't believe that I is so hardwired into their conversations. And the reason that that happens, the experts are out on this. Some people say, you know, it's around 5,000 words a day. Some say 7,500 words a day. Some say it's 5,000 for men, 7,000 for women. But we talk a lot every day. We talk a lot. And it is amazing to see, particularly in a selling conversation, just how often the word I is used. So I'd like you to just think about that. And I'm not saying never ever have a conversation and not use the word I. I'm not saying that. That would be ridiculous. I guess what I'm saying is that less in a selling conversation with others, less of the my, me, or I, and more of the us, we, or our. So it is that collective conversation framework or language framework rather than the singular framework that is definitely going to be more engaging for more people. And talking about engaging, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about engaging with customers. And I just pulled this from the Macquarie Dictionary as I was putting together this program. You know, what is, according to the Macquarie Dictionary, what does the word engage? Well, that actually engage means to occupy the attention or efforts of a person, you know, to attract and hold fast. And in sales, there's a term, and I'm not sure if you've heard of it, which is called pacing. And in a word, pacing is really the ability to match and mirror people. Now, I mentioned this a couple of minutes ago. It's the art of getting into step with people. The truth of the matter is, you know, you, me, all of us, we only really get one opportunity to make a positive first impression. So our capacity to do it effectively using some of the stuff I've just spoken about today, and also some of these other tips I'm about to give you now, profoundly affects having a meaningful conversation with people. So I'm just going to give you 2 or 3 very, very simple yet obvious tips. When you meet someone, make sure that you look them in the eye. As people, we like being looked at, not being stared through. It's really, really important. And you'd be amazed just how many people at the moment of connection with the handshake, that's time post-COVID-19 for another world, so we'll leave that. But when the handshake is connected, how many people drop an eye or move from that eye contact? So it's really important to be mindful when you meet someone that you look them in the eye. I'd also like you to try and find some common ground with people. Start, you know, go and buy a book on 25 questions to ask a complete stranger. Get prepared to try and find some common ground. And to me, common ground is typically trying to find or get an opinion on what I call a non-controversial subject. Now I'll leave you to determine what is controversial and what is not. But if you can find some common ground when you're meeting people that is authentic, that is genuine, that's transparent in its approach, it goes a long way to creating that baseline to having an open and meaningful conversation. Just another tip I'd like to give you, give their name the way they give it. What I mean by that is your name, my name, they're all deeply, deeply personal to us. It's hardwired deep in our DNA. And you and I will always introduce ourselves to a stranger the way that we want to be known. And now Australians in particular have a habit of shortening names. So for example, if you meet a Christopher and your brother or cousin or close friend, his name is Christopher, but you know him as Chris. When you meet this person, first off, if he introduces himself as Christopher, it is nice to meet you, Christopher. Now, it's over a period of time, Christopher and Peter may develop a relationship where we get to Pete and Chris over a period of time, but it's earned. As I said, it's authentic. There's a reason there. But be very careful not to shorten people's names. So Jennifer, if you meet Jennifer, it's not, oh, hi Jenny. It is Jennifer. Shortening up the names, if it's appropriate, over a period of time, when it's earned by everyone, you can get to that point. Look, I wanted to put this up because one of the emails that I got regarding, you know, the customer journey and how do you actually continually, you know, develop your pipeline, I just want to put this slide up and give you an idea of what the journey looks like. So a suspect in sales is anyone in the market. It doesn't mean that they're all likely. As a matter of fact, most of them are not likely to be a buyer for your product or service, but that's the broader population. The goal becomes, out of all of those suspects, to develop prospects. And prospects are typically people that have met some sort of a qualification criteria for your product or your service, where there is either a low, a moderate, or a high probability of them engaging and doing business with us. So suspects is everyone. Prospects through marketing and networking and development to find those people who you are the best fit for, who have the highest probability of engaging with you, to then become a customer. Now, I stand to be corrected because everyone's got a view of the world on this. But for me, a customer to me is what I would call a one-term purchaser, a one-time purchaser. So someone may come through that from a suspect, develop into a prospect, and then they've done business with me once. But the real goal of any business, is to try and create loyal, trustworthy customers who continue to use your product or service. And if they're not using it, they're recommending it. Because once they come back and they do business again, to me, the term I use is they become clients. So for that person who's out there who was asking for this, I hope that brings some sense to you. But the real goal here, is to turn those clients into advocates. And advocates simply are people who are affecting positively you or your brand, your product, your service, your value proposition, your offer. They are populating and positively infecting the suspect and prospect population to become more customers. So it goes round and round like that. So suspects, they're the first one. That's where everyone is born from. A prospect is a qualified entity that has a probability of doing business with you. A customer, one-time purchaser. We now want a customer. We don't want a customer, we want a customer for life. So how do we nurture and account manage that person so they are a multiple purchaser? And if they're not, they at least and if not, that customer or client has turned into an advocate, which means that they are populating our brand, presenting our brand or our offer in a really positive manner to others. So that's really the customer journey from my perspective. What do people want? Well, they want lots of things. So I've just got 4 here. There are 4 crucial things in my view that Australian consumers or customers want today. And the truth is, what you're going to hear here, none of it is rocket science, but everyone on this webinar can actually deliver it if you're motivated to do so. So first up, a couple of things. Fair price. Now, okay, what does that mean? Look, pricing to me, I think it's critical. It's important to you and to me for revenue reasons, but it's also really important to your customers. So the pricing needs to be fair. That's my approach. It just needs to be fair. It needs to be able to be justified. Now, when deciding if your price is fair, I guess you could benefit from maybe looking at your competitors so you can gauge the customer's expectations. When was the last time you mystery shopped a competitor to gain some market intel? All I'm asking you to consider, and all I'm trying to say here, is that it's important to know where you stand in comparison with the competition. The key thing with pricing is it needs to be transparent. So whether you're above or below the market rate, it's letting your customers know why this is the case and exactly what they're going to get for their money. So price matters. It needs to be fair. Next one. People want good service. Well, is this a term that many businesses put on a boardroom wall, or it's on a mission statement? We offer really good service. I go into businesses as part of what we do to help them, and we talk about service. And I don't think there's ever been an SME in the country that said to us that they offer poor service. But the truth is, good customer service has been proven time and time again to allow businesses to charge more. And customers continually suggest that they'd be happy paying more for any product or any service if, and only if, it meant it would improve the level of service. And I see this as a real opportunity because, with respect to many businesses in this country today, the level of service that we actually deliver to our customers has scope for massive improvement. You know, I'm just going to ask you listening in on this call, when was the last time, just talking about going back and looking at some of the best of the old while we continue to embrace the new, but when was the last time, you talk about you're having a meaningful conversation with a customer or connecting with customers, when was the last time you penned out a quick 2-paragraph handwritten thank you card to a customer for no reason? So for example, hi Jack, I'm just sitting here in my office and your name came across my desk. I just wanted to pen out a quick thank you for your loyalty to date. It's appreciated. Speak again soon. Regards, Peter. It goes into an envelope. It's handwritten. You put Jack Smith Engineering, 1 Smith Street, Smithville. Put a postage stamp on it. Don't frank it, and just send it. If everyone in this webinar found 20 people, I defy anyone, this has all been recorded, do this. Find 20 of your customers between now and tomorrow afternoon and write them a handwritten thank you card. And I defy anyone on this call to go back and say they never got traction. Just saying thank you is one way of showing that you don't talk about good service, you actually demonstrate it. It matters. Just a quick handwritten thank you card, not an email, but a thank you card. And the reason I'm recommending a handwritten thank you card is so we can humanize that. Just pick 20. You know, when was the last time you just said thank you to a supplier? You know, we've been doing business for a long time, and I just wanted to say thank you for your service to date. I want to say thank you for being consistent. Whenever we've been, you know, in a hole, you've managed to help us. And I just wanted to put my thoughts in writing. The time it takes to write that is about 60 to 90 seconds. The investment is $1 for a stamp, and just have that. Good service matters to people. Look, good product self-evidently matters. You know, creating a solid product is obviously critical for the end user, and it's critical for you as well. There is absolutely no point outlaying for any, you know, excessive manufacturing costs, as an example, if no one is buying the product because it's flawed. And I'm just asking for those people in that space on this webinar, make sure you regularly just stop and ask yourself, in 2020, is what I am solving a compelling need for my customers? You know, is it really solving a compelling need today? And if not, just stop. You know, I don't know, change, modify, delete, innovate, but do something. Don't ever let your ego or your emotions get in the way of your business growth. And the other thing that people want is they actually want to feel valued. And all I've got to say about that is how much your customers feel valued by a company is often overlooked. And, you know, so many SMEs today, particularly in this last 3 months with this coronavirus pandemic, there are so many business owners, I get it, on this call that are just lying in the fog. And they seem to forget that without customers, there is no business. And it's really, really important that your people feel that you have connected with them in some form. Ideally, H to H, as I said on that first webinar, no longer B2B, business to business, or B2C, business to consumer. It's all today about H to H, which is human to human. So hopefully that's a couple of tips for you that you can take away. And look, and finally, what I would like to do is just share with you that language actually matters. It really matters in sales. How you speak and when you communicate with the customers is profoundly important. And being salesish is very, very off-putting. So I'd just like you to, you know, ask the question, make sure, like, do you use any industry jargon, or do you adapt your language to say what your customers say? The words you choose, as I said before, will profoundly determine the path the relationship takes with the customer. So I thought I'd put together just a couple of slides, or a slide of some negative, or what I call dirty words. Now, you can ring into many businesses today, and someone at the front desk, he or she answers the phone, and we say, can I speak to Mary Jones, please? Oh, Mary's on the phone at the moment. Would you like to hold? Well, that's one way, but maybe the more customer-centric approach would be, Mary's on the phone at the moment. Do you have the time to wait? Now, I can share with you, If you say that, 94 people in every 100 will say yes. And the reason that they will say that, we've got data on all of this, the reason that they will say that is because right now, when that person rang for Mary in his or her day, that was the time that worked for them. So it's just on the phone at the moment. Can you hold? Mary's just on the phone at the moment. Do you have the time to wait? Is a much warmer and engaging way of saying things. Salespeople often say, I should get this done by. Well, we need to be far more in 2020 proactive in our language. I will get this done by, and ideally put a time on it. I will get that done by close of business Wednesday afternoon. I will get that done for you by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, whatever the case may be. Now, this next one, cost and price. Look, there's nothing wrong with cost or price, nothing. And I get it, it's common, people use it all the time. But depending on your product or service, maybe you might like to consider the word investment. Rather than a cost, maybe it is an investment depending on your product or service. Excuse me. Many Australian businesses get people to sign things, and Australians hate signing things. So don't ask them. Here's a couple of options. Just get them to, I'll get you to approve. I'll get you to endorse. Look, I'll just get you to authorize. Or can I just get you to okay that? Rather than sign the order or sign the contract. Well, it's just too salesy, it's too strong. It's just the wrong language. So maybe instead of the order or the contract, let's just call it the paperwork or the agreement. Really simple stuff. Next one, buy. Nothing wrong with that. You want to buy it, but Australians don't like to buy. Depending on the product, Australians love to own. And in sales, we're not looking for their business today. When you're talking to people, the language is now. It's about now. So not that you would ever talk like this. I'm just going to see if I can bang something together here. A negative way of communicating would be to call this person Jack. Jack, now that we've worked out that you want to buy the widget, the cost is $1,250. And if you sign our order, we'll get that moving for you today, is one thing. As opposed to, well, look, Jack, now that we've identified that this is the widget that you'd ideally like to own, as I mentioned earlier, the total investment is $1,250. And obviously, if you feel comfortable in approving the paperwork, we'll be in a position to get that moving for you now. One negative, one positive. Language matters. Now, you never say all that in one, but I'm trying to accentuate the point here that you need to consider changing some of these negative sales words. Have I got a deal for you? Oh, well. Look, I'm not saying don't use deal if that's your language, but maybe on a case-by-case basis, it's not a deal. But like, Jack, I'd really like to explore what sort of opportunity maybe we might be able to do around that, by the end of the month. There's a couple of opportunities going with that rather than deals. Customer rings and I got a problem with that. Well, maybe you and your team don't have problems in your business, because here at Sales Masters, we don't have problems, but we say, Jack, Mary, I understand there are a number of concerns that need to be addressed. And so let's just nut them out. Let's prioritize them. Let's work together for solutions, concerns rather than problems. Now, I've heard salespeople say, oh, I need to look at something cheaper. You can't afford that. I need to look at something cheaper. So my response would be, look, Jack, if that's your budget parameters, why don't we discuss something that may be a little more economical for you? Rather than saying cheaper, just something a little more economical. Allow people to have their dignity when talking with them. Look, that just about wraps it up. So what I would like to do, the next session is, I hope that's brought you some value. I'm going to hand you back to Oliver in just a moment. But before I do, the next session is going to be on the 11th of June, and it's going to be about overcoming objections and closing business. I've been thinking about how to help you guys, and I'd like to help if I can. So what I have elected to do, only for the people on this webinar and only until close of business tomorrow night, if you have a sales issue and you'd like to schedule some one-on-one time with me at no money around any area around sales, I'd like to help you on behalf of CCIQ. That is the website, salesmasters.com.au/CCIQ. If you want to go there, give me your details, I'll come back to you and we'll schedule some time. Now, I cut me some slack here, because if I get overwhelmed, I don't know how many people are on this webinar, but I'm just saying, I give you my word, I will be back in touch with you. So it's authentic. I'm pretty confident I can answer or bring some assistance to most of the problems around most of the sales issues in Australia today. If you'd like that and you'd like some help in that, I'd like to really offer that. So on that note, I hope that's brought you some value. Thank you very much for your attendance. Go to the website, fill in details, and let me come back to you. And Oliver, on that note, I'll flick it back to you, and I'll go back to sharing my webcam.
Thank you very much, Peter. Look, we definitely we have some time to run through a few questions. We've had one come through, which was regarding the creating customers for life. How long would it take to go from suspect to advocate?
It depends on the product for a start. So I'll just use Salesmaster's example. Our lead time is typically 2 to 3 months from when someone comes as a prospect. We nurture, we clearly define the brief, and then we deliver it, one-time customer. And then the assumption we've done our job well, and in 27 years, we've never not been invited back. So from there, what we do, we would go back a period of time after that into a client. And I would say probably 12 or 18 months when they've really got to know you and you've really delivered some measurable outcomes. They're very comfortable. You're a trusted advisor. They then become advocates. Now, I can only relate that in my business, but I want you to think about that framework as an example, and all the people on the webinar, and be able to draw some correlations to your product or service or offer. What would that look like? But it's about it's not just the time, it's what you do in the time. That's the key thing. It's how effectively you account managing these people, and it's not just the decision maker, but all the other influences that are important. So everyone needs to be touched in different ways.
Fantastic, some great information. Thanks, Peter. Anyone who didn't get to ask questions today, definitely take up Peter's offer on his one-on-one session. I think that's a great opportunity to have a chat.
Yeah.
Now, look, that's all we have time for today. So thank you to Peter for taking the time to present today. I'd also like to thank everyone who has joined us for today's session. We will send out a copy of the webinar recording and slides later today. Don't forget to also register for the remaining webinar presented by Peter on dealing with daily sales objections. We will share a link to this in our email. Please make sure you check out our events page for any upcoming events and webinars, and also subscribe to our newsletter to be informed of the latest topics. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.